My father leaned back in his chair, wine glass dangling loosely from his fingers, and laughed. "Relax," he said loudly, just enough for the room to hear. "She's just a woman in a low-ranking uniform." The hall erupted in polite laughter, the kind that pretends not to wound but always does. I didn't flinch, I didn't speak, I simply watched. Because 10 minutes later the bride would take the microphone, look straight at me, and calmly say something that would freeze every smile in that room. "Good evening, Major General Whitman, Division Commander." And in that moment my father's world would crack. Fan 1, the laugh. The steering wheel felt cool beneath my palms as I drove through the long manicured avenues of Ashburn, Virginia. Late autumn had settled in, painting the trees in muted golds and deep reds, the kind of beauty that looked deliberate, curated. Every lawn trimmed just right, every mailbox polished, every house standing like a quiet declaration of success. This was my father's world. I hadn't lived here in nearly 20 years, but my body remembered the turns. Muscle memory guided me past the country club, the stone church on the corner, the gated entrance to the neighborhood where I grew up. Places frozen in time, even as I had moved through deserts, war rooms, and airfields half a world away. The wedding invitation sat on the passenger seat, thick cream cardstock embossed with gold lettering. My younger brother's name, his fiancée's name. My father's pride practically radiated from the paper. "Family celebration," it read. I parked and sat there for a moment, engine off, listening to the ticking sound of cooling metal. Silence had become an old friend over the years. Silence didn't judge. Silence didn't laugh. I stepped out of the car wearing a simple dark blue service dress uniform. Nothing ceremonial, no medals displayed, just clean lines, pressed fabric, and rank pins that most civilians never noticed or understood. Inside the venue, crystal chandeliers cast warm light across polished marble floors. The air smelled like roses and expensive cologne. Conversations hummed softly, layered with restrained laughter and the clink of glassware. I spotted my father immediately. Frank Whitman stood near the front of the hall, surrounded by men in tailored suits and women draped in pearls. His posture was relaxed, confident, the posture of a man who had always believed the room belonged to him. He saw me. His eyes flicked briefly to my uniform, then away again, as if I were a passing server rather than his daughter. I felt it then, that familiar tightening in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, recognition. Nothing had changed. I moved quietly to the side, setting my coat over a chair. A few heads turned, some polite nods. No one asked where I'd been. No one asked what I did. That was fine. I wasn't here to be seen. The ceremony rehearsal was about to begin when my father raised his glass and gestured casually in my direction. Someone near him whispered something, perhaps asking who I was. That's when he laughed. Not a cruel laugh, worse, a dismissive one. "Don't worry," he said, voice carrying easily across the marble. "She's just wearing a uniform, low-ranking stuff, nothing important." A beat. Then laughter rippled outward, controlled, courteous, safe. The kind of laughter people use when they want to belong. I stood very still. Years of training had taught me how to keep my face neutral, how to regulate breathing under pressure, how not to react when every instinct screamed to. So I didn't react. I studied my father instead. His smile was easy, comfortable. He had always been good at that, shaping the narrative before anyone else could. In his world, perception mattered more than truth. Titles were only impressive if they came from the right places. The military to him was something respectable in theory and embarrassing in practice, especially for a daughter. Too rigid, too unfeminine, too visible. I remembered being 17, standing in this same building for a charity gala, wearing a borrowed dress, while my father introduced my brother as the future of the Whitman name. I remembered the way my acceptance letter from West Point had sat unopened on the kitchen counter for 2 days. "Why would you do that to yourself?" he'd asked then. And to us? The past didn't come back in waves, it came back in sharp, quiet flashes. A server brushed past me offering champagne. I declined with a small shake of my head. I didn't drink before missions. The bride's family arrived shortly after. Ava Russo walked in beside my brother, her posture straight, even in heels, her expression composed. She scanned the room not nervously but deliberately. When her eyes met mine, she stopped. Just for half a second. Then she nodded. A nod I recognized instantly. Not social, not polite. Professional. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown contact. We need to talk. Somewhere quiet. Before the ceremony. I exhaled slowly. The laughter from earlier still echoed faintly in my ears, but something else settled in its place, a sense I knew well. The moment before movement. The instant when a situation revealed itself not as a misunderstanding, but as terrain. I looked back at my father. He was laughing again now, hand on someone's shoulder, completely at ease, certain of his position, certain of his story. He had no idea what was coming. And neither yet did I. Known contact. That was what the message now read after I saved the number. I didn't reply immediately. Years in uniform had trained me to pause before acting, to let adrenaline burn off so judgment could surface. I moved toward a quieter corridor at the back of the venue, away from the laughter and the string quartet warming up. The walls there were paneled in dark wood, heavy with old money and older expectations. My reflection followed me in the glass blue uniform's straight shoulders, eyes that had learned to hold steady even when everything underneath shifted. My father's laugh followed me like an echo. It always had. When I was a child, Frank Whitman's laughter filled rooms the way sunlight did, warm, inviting, admired. People leaned toward him when he spoke. Teachers praised him at school events. Pastors thanked him publicly for his donations. He liked being the man others deferred to. He liked knowing where he stood. What he never liked was uncertainty. And nothing unsettled him more than the idea that his daughter had chosen a path he couldn't script. The first real crack appeared the night my mother died. A sudden aneurysm. No warning. One moment she was humming in the kitchen, the next she was gone. The house fell quiet in a way it never recovered from. My father became sharper after that, more precise, more controlling. He spoke often about appearances, about maintaining standards, about what people would think. I was 16. Grief hit me like a weight I couldn't lift. I needed structure, purpose, something solid. When a visiting ROTC officer spoke at my school describing leadership as service rather than status, something inside me aligned. I came home that day and told my father I wanted to apply to West Point. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He looked at me the way one might look at a cracked heirloom. "That's not for girls like you," he said calmly, "and it's certainly not for this family." From that moment on, the line between us hardened. He supported my brother's every interest: art camps, internships, architecture programs overseas. When my brother won a regional design award, my father threw a party, caterers, toasts, a string quartet in the backyard. When my West Point acceptance letter arrived, my father slid it back across the table. "If you go," he said, "don't expect us to celebrate." I went anyway. The corridor ended at a small alcove overlooking the gardens. I leaned against the railing and finally typed back. "Where?" The reply came instantly. "Service entrance, 5 minutes." 5 minutes later, Ava Russo stood in front of me, her expression composed but intent. Out of her wedding attire, she looked younger, almost unguarded, but her stance gave her away. Weight, balanced, eyes alert. She moved like someone who had learned that danger didn't always announce itself. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "For what?" I asked. For not reacting, she replied, "Most people would have." I considered that. Most people don't get trained out of it. She nodded once. That's what I thought. We walked together toward the side entrance. Outside, the evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of leaves and distant traffic. The noise from the hall softened behind us, replaced by a calm that felt temporary. "I need you to understand something," Ava said, turning to face me fully. "I didn't know who you were when I first met your family. Not really. Just that you were minimized." A familiar word. But then I started hearing things, she continued. Comments. Stories that didn't quite add up. Your father telling people you were unstable, that you had trouble following authority, that you were obsessed with rank. My jaw tightened. He's been saying that for years. "I checked," she said simply. "Checked." "I'm an officer," Ava replied. "When something feels off, we verify." She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone, scrolling briefly before handing it to me. On the screen was a photograph, a younger version of her face streaked with dirt, eyes fierce and focused. Around her stood soldiers I recognized. A valley I recognized. Kandahar. I was there, she said softly. You pulled us out. The world narrowed. I remembered that day, the dust, the radio crackling, the sound of rounds hitting metal. I remembered issuing orders without hesitation, trusting my people to execute. I remembered not looking back. I didn't know your name then, Ava continued, but I never forgot your voice, or the way you stayed calm when everything else fell apart. I handed the phone back. So when your father started pushing a narrative, she said, I knew it wasn't about concern. It was about control. A slow realization settled in my chest. What is he planning? I asked. Ava hesitated. A speech, after the ceremony, framed as a tribute to family. But the draft I saw... She shook her head. It paints you as a cautionary tale, a warning. The fault line beneath my feet shifted. I didn't come here to fight him, I said quietly. I know, Ava replied. That's why you need to be ready. Ready. The word carried weight. She stepped closer. There's someone else you should meet. She helped me understand what your father is doing and how to stop it without becoming him. I met her gaze. Who? Dr. Maya Singh, she said, former defense strategist. She knows how these campaigns work, family ones included. The garden lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the gravel paths. Somewhere inside, my father's voice rose again in laughter. I straightened my shoulders. Then let's talk, I said. Because I was beginning to understand something I'd avoided for a long time. This wasn't about my father's approval. It was about reclaiming the truth he'd tried to bury. We met Dr. Maya Singh the next morning in a place that felt deliberately unremarkable, a narrow coffee shop tucked between a dry cleaner and a law office just outside downtown Alexandria. No chandeliers, no marble, just worn wooden tables, the low hiss of an espresso machine, and the smell of roasted beans clinging to the air like something honest. Maya chose the table in the back corner where she could see both the door and the counter. Of course she did. She stood when we approached. Medium height, silver threaded through her dark hair pulled back neatly. Her eyes were sharp, assessing but not unkind. She wore a tailored blazer over a simple blouse, professional, restrained, intentional. Major General Whitman, she said, extending her hand. Her voice was calm, steady. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I shook her hand. Please, Haley. She smiled faintly. Only if you call me Maya. We sat. Ava ordered coffee for all three of us without asking. That told me more about their relationship than any introduction could have. Maya wasted no time. I'm going to be direct, she said, folding her hands on the table. Your father is not acting out of emotion. He's running a narrative operation. I raised an eyebrow, against his own daughter. Especially against his own daughter, she replied. Those are the easiest targets. Familiar terrain, predictable reactions. She slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were printed screenshots, social media posts, comments, a blog article from a local political site with a misleading headline about troubled veterans and family embarrassment. My name wasn't mentioned directly, but the descriptions were unmistakable. He's laying groundwork, Maya continued, planting doubt before anyone asks questions. By the time you speak, he wants people already primed not to listen. Ava leaned forward. He told people she was volatile, that she can't let things go. I exhaled slowly. So if I respond emotionally? You confirm the story Maya finished, which is why you won't. She reached into her bag and placed a small device on the table. A voice recorder, compact, unassuming. From now on, she said, you document everything. Conversations, requests, pressure, especially anything involving legal or financial matters. I studied the recorder. It felt heavier than it looked. I didn't come here to destroy my father, I said. Maya's gaze softened just slightly. Good, because that's not what we're doing. She leaned back. This isn't about revenge. It's about containment. You establish truth. You set boundaries. And you let his own actions speak louder than your response. A familiar framework, clear, strategic. I can do that, I said. Maya nodded. I thought you could. We spent the next hour mapping the terrain, the wedding schedule, the reception order, who would speak, when microphones would be live, which guests were press adjacent. Maya had done her homework. Names, affiliations, influence networks, all neatly categorized. Ava contributed quietly, filling in gaps. She knew which cousins repeated gossip, which family friends pretended neutrality while feeding rumors. She'd been listening for months. She's been watching me, I realized aloud. Ava met my eyes. I've been protecting myself, she said. You just happen to be part of the same pattern. When the meeting ended, Maya handed me the recorder. Keep it with you, she said. And one more thing. She paused. Your father will try to isolate you. He'll frame it as concern or reconciliation. He may ask you to sign something. I nodded. He already has. Maya's expression hardened. Then the next move is coming sooner than we thought. That evening my phone rang. My father's name filled the screen. I didn't answer immediately. I turned the recorder on. Then I picked up. Haley, he said, voice warm, almost gentle. I was hoping we could have dinner, just the two of us. Clear the air before tomorrow. I pictured him as I'd left him, laughing easily, confident in his control of the room. Of course, I said evenly, I'd like that. He named a restaurant, expensive, public, strategic. As I ended the call, Ava looked at me with quiet concern. You don't have to go, she said. Yes, I replied, I do. Because this wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about understanding the full shape of the fault line running through my family and deciding where I stood when it finally broke. The restaurant my father chose sat on a hill overlooking the river, the kind of place that prided itself on quiet exclusivity. Valets in pressed jackets, low lighting, tables spaced just far enough apart to ensure privacy without sacrificing spectacle. It was a room designed for conversations that wanted witnesses without consequences. I arrived 10 minutes early. The maitre d' led me to a table already set for two. My father's name was known here. I could tell by the way the staff smiled, respectful, practiced, deferential. I sat with my back straight, hands folded loosely in my lap, the recorder tucked discreetly into the inner pocket of my uniform jacket. I didn't order a drink. He arrived precisely on time. Frank Whitman still wore authority well. Gray hair at the temples, tailored blazer, confident stride. When he saw me, his expression softened into something that might have passed for affection if I hadn't known him better. There you are, he said warmly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. You look, well. It was a calculated pause, an assessment. Thank you, I replied. So do you. We sat, menus were placed, water poured. For a few minutes we danced around neutral topics, the weather, traffic, the view. He asked about my flight, not my work. I answered politely, briefly. The way one does when the real conversation waits behind a door neither side wants to open first. When our food arrived, he leaned back slightly, knife and fork untouched. I want you to know, he began, that everything I do comes from concern. There it was. For you, he continued, for this family. I nodded once, non-committal. You've always been intense, he said carefully. Driven. That's admirable, but people don't always understand that kind of ambition in a woman. I let the silence stretch. He sighed as if burdened by my lack of response. Tomorrow is important, he went on. Your brother's future, Ava's family, our reputation. I'd hate for old tensions to distract from that. I don't plan to make a scene, I said calmly. Good, he replied quickly, too quickly, because that's what I wanted to discuss. He reached into his leather briefcase and withdrew a slim folder. He placed it on the table between us with deliberate casualness, as if it were nothing more than a wine list. Just a formality, he said, some paperwork to simplify things. I didn't touch it. Simplify what I asked. He smiled. Assets, responsibilities. Your mother's estate was never fully streamlined. This would make it easier for everyone. Everyone, I repeated. Yes, he said smoothly, especially your brother. With his new life starting, it's only right that things be consolidated. I opened the folder slowly. The language was dense, legal, but certain phrases stood out immediately. Irrevocable transfer, full relinquishment of claim, immediate effect. My heartbeat remained steady. Training kicked in, read, assess, do not react. This removes my rights, I said quietly. He waved a hand, temporarily, in practice. In writing, I replied. His smile tightened. Haley, he said, lowering his voice. You don't need a house. You're never here. This is about practicality. This is about control, I said. His eyes flashed, just for a moment. You've always been difficult, he snapped softly. Always had to prove something. I closed the folder and slid it back toward him. I'll have my attorney review it, I said evenly. The shift was immediate. His warmth evaporated. An attorney, he hissed. After everything I've done for you. You mean after everything you've decided for me, I corrected. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Do you have any idea how this looks? Bringing lawyers into family matters? Playing soldier instead of daughter? I met his gaze. I am a soldier. He scoffed. That uniform again. The words landed exactly where he intended. I reached into my wallet, removed a $100 bill, and placed it neatly on the table. That will cover my share, I said, standing. Please have your lawyer contact mine. Sit down, he ordered. I didn't. Haley, he said sharply, if you walk away now. I already did, I replied. As I turned, I felt his stare burning into my back. The dining room buzzed softly, oblivious. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, washing over me like a reset. In my car, hands steady, I removed the recorder and stopped the recording. The phone buzzed before I even started the engine. Ava, he posted something. She sent a link. The headline made my stomach drop. A story, carefully worded, anonymous sources, concerns about emotional instability and family strain. A grainy photograph of me exhausted after a deployment repurposed as evidence of decline. I closed my eyes. Then I started the car. Because the dinner hadn't been reconciliation. It had been confirmation. And now there would be no more guessing. The night after the article went live, sleep refused to come. I sat in the dark of my temporary apartment, the city lights of Alexandria glowing faintly through the blinds like distant watchfires. The laptop hummed softly on the kitchen table, its screen filled with open tabs, news sites, archived posts, cached versions of the story already spreading faster than it could be corrected. Emotionally volatile, estranged from family, obsessed with rank and recognition. Each phrase was a blade carefully sharpened, designed not to kill outright but to weaken credibility, to make people tilt their heads and say, well, maybe. I had faced insurgents who were less methodical. At 2:14 a.m., my phone rang. Maya. I've seen it, she said without preamble. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath it. It's worse than I expected. Legally, I asked. Morally, she replied. Legally, it's sloppy, which means it was rushed. That tracked. My father didn't like delays. He liked momentum. Come in, Maya said, now. Her office sat in a converted brick building near the river. By the time I arrived, the lights were on and the door unlocked. Inside, the space looked nothing like a therapist's office or a consultant's suite. One wall was covered in maps, political districts, social networks, media ecosystems. Another held a whiteboard already filled with names, arrows, and timestamps. Ava was there, seated at the table, her wedding dress replaced by fatigues. She looked up when I entered. They're escalating, she said. So are we, Maya replied, gesturing for me to sit. She clicked a remote, and the screen at the far end of the room lit up. This is what we know, Maya began. Your father seeded the narrative through 2 channels, social credibility and plausible concern. He didn't attack your service directly. He questioned your stability. Which is harder to disprove, Ava said quietly. Unless, Maya continued, you changed the frame. She brought up another file, official, sealed. Confirmation of rank, she said. Updated as of last quarter. Major General, Division Commander, active duty. My name sat there in black and white. We don't release this ourselves, Maya said. That looks defensive. Then how I asked. She looked at Ava. Ava straightened. I speak, she said simply. The room fell quiet. I'm the bride, she continued. They expect me to give a speech. No one questions that. And I'm not attacking anyone. I'm honoring someone. I felt a tightness in my chest that surprised me. Maya nodded. We support that with facts, visuals, verification. The truth presented cleanly. She turned back to the board. We control timing, the reception, microphones, screens, press presence. We release a packet simultaneously rank confirmation service record summaries third-party validation. Who I asked. Maya smiled slightly. A 4-star general who still believes in integrity. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. Haley, a familiar voice said, calm, measured, it's Alistair Vance. My former commander, now stationed at the Pentagon. I was informed, he continued, that there's a campaign questioning your service. Yes, sir, I said. A pause. Send me what you have, he said, and stop worrying. This shouldn't have gone on this long. The call ended. I looked up at Maya and Ava. That's our anchor, Maya said. We don't argue opinions, we establish reality. For the next 12 hours, the room became something else entirely. Phones buzzed, emails flew, files were verified and re-verified. Ava coordinated discreetly with venue staff under the pretense of wedding logistics. Maya contacted journalists she trusted, people who still believed that truth mattered more than access. I contributed where I could, but mostly I watched. Watched the story I'd lived in silence take shape as data. By dawn, the whiteboard was full. One final item remained. Maya handed me a garment bag. Inside was my Class A dress uniform. Pressed, perfect. I ran my fingers over the fabric, the weight of it familiar and grounding. You don't have to wear it, Ava said softly. I shook my head. I do, I replied, not for them, for me. As the sun rose over the river casting pale light across the office, Maya capped her marker. We're done preparing, she said. From here on we execute. I exhaled slowly. For the first time since I'd driven into my father's neighborhood, I felt something settle inside me, not anger, not fear. Clarity. The ballroom of the Four Seasons looked exactly as my father intended it to, timeless, expensive, unquestioned. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light across linen-draped tables. A string quartet floated near the stage, their music soft and ornamental, designed to soothe rather than stir. Men in tailored suits stood with glasses held just so. Women in silk dresses leaned in close, trading careful smiles and curated compliments. Power disguised as celebration. I arrived after the ceremony had already begun, not late, precisely on time for what mattered. The doors at the back of the room opened quietly and I stepped inside. The Class A uniform felt different here than it did on base. Heavier somehow, not because of the medals, those were minimal, but because of the eyes. Curious, appraising. A few people recognized the insignia, most didn't. To them it was just another uniform. I took a seat near the back, hands folded, posture straight. I didn't look toward the front. I didn't look toward my father. I didn't need to. I could feel him. Frank Whitman sat in the front row exactly where he believed he belonged. Patriarch, benefactor, the man who made things happen. He leaned toward the man beside him and said something under his breath. Then he laughed. Loud enough. She always does this, he said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. Dramatic entrances, don't worry, just a woman in a low-ranking uniform. The ripple of laughter spread again, wider this time. Easier. People relaxed into it. They wanted permission not to take me seriously. I remained still. The ceremony concluded. Applause rose, polite and expected. The officiant stepped aside. The MC announced the reception program, toasts, gratitude, family remarks. My father stood. He moved toward the microphone with practiced confidence, adjusting his cufflinks as he walked. He smiled at the crowd, lifting his glass. Family, he began warmly. Friends, we are gathered here not just to celebrate a marriage, but to honor legacy. I watched Ava from the corner of my eye. She stood as well. My father continued, we all make choices in life. Some bring us closer together. Some... He paused, glancing back toward me. Some pull us away. A few people shifted uncomfortably, others nodded. He raised his glass again, but tonight we focus on unity, on what truly matters. He finished to applause. Then Ava stepped forward. She took the microphone gently from his hand. Not abruptly, not defiantly, just firmly enough that there was no mistaking the transfer of control. The room quieted. Ava didn't smile. She didn't rush. She stood tall, shoulders back, breath steady. Before I begin my remarks, she said clearly, there is someone I need to acknowledge. Her gaze moved not to the front row, not to her new husband, but to the back of the room. To me. A hush fell. Conversations died mid-thought. Even the quartet went silent, bows hovering above strings. Ava's voice carried easily unshaken. "Good evening," she said. "Major General Whitman, Division Commander." For a moment the words didn't land. They hovered in the air, foreign and unfamiliar. Then they settled. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room. Heads turned, whispers ignited. I saw phones come out not to film drama but to verify reality. I stood. Not quickly, not dramatically. I rose the way I'd been trained to rise, deliberate, grounded. Ava brought her hand up in a crisp, precise salute. It was perfect. Not ceremonial, not symbolic. Professional. The effect was immediate. My father froze. The color drained from his face so fast it was almost startling. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again as if his mind were scrambling to rewrite a script that had just been shredded. Ava lowered her hand. "The officer seated at the back of this room," she continued, "is the woman who commanded the operation that saved my unit's lives in Kandahar. She didn't seek recognition. She didn't tell stories. She just did her job." Behind her the screen lit up. Clean, unadorned. My name, my rank, my assignment. Then photographs, field briefings, unit citations. A short video clip, General Vance unmistakable in his 4-star uniform confirming my service record with the kind of authority that didn't invite debate. "This is not a matter of opinion," Ava said. "It's a matter of fact." The room erupted. Not in chaos but in applause, slow at first, then louder. People stood one by one. The sound filled the space, pressing in from all sides. I didn't move. I stood there breathing evenly, letting the truth speak for itself. My father took a step toward the stage, shaking his head. "This is absurd," he said hoarsely. This is a misunderstanding." No one looked at him. Not anymore. The applause continued, not celebratory but resolute. Acknowledgement, recognition. I met Ava's eyes. She nodded once. That was all. I sat back down as the noise swelled, as the room adjusted to a new reality, one where stories couldn't override facts and laughter no longer protected lies. When the applause finally faded, the silence that followed was deeper than anything that had come before. The fault line had broken, and there was no putting it back together. I didn't stay for the rest of the reception. I slipped out while the room was still trying to decide what to do with the truth it had just been handed. People were standing talking in lowered voices now, their laughter replaced by something quieter and more unsettled. The kind of silence that comes after a storm when debris is still falling and no one is quite sure what remains intact. Outside, the night air was cool and steady. The city hummed softly in the distance, indifferent to weddings and reputations and family legacies. I stood there for a moment on the stone steps, my breath visible, my uniform catching the pale glow of the lights behind me. For the first time that weekend, my shoulders relaxed. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Ava. Ava, I meant every word. Thank you for letting me say it. I typed back slowly. Thank you for telling the truth when it mattered. I sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a deep bone-level fatigue I recognized well. Not the exhaustion of fear or anger, but the kind that follows completion. Mission accomplished. Area secure. The next morning the fallout began. By noon, the article that had painted me as unstable was gone, retracted, quietly replaced by a bland editor's note citing incomplete sourcing. A more reputable outlet ran a follow-up, this one factual, concise, impossible to spin. My service record wasn't celebrated, it was simply stated. Dates, commands, verifications. That was enough. By evening, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. Then he showed up. I heard the knock through the apartment door, sharp, impatient. I waited a moment before opening it. When I did, Frank Whitman stood there looking older than I remembered. Not frail, just diminished. His confidence, once effortless, now seemed forced, like a suit that no longer fit. You humiliated me, he said without greeting. I studied him quietly. The man who had filled rooms with laughter. The man who had decided years ago that control was the same as love. I didn't say a word, I replied. You let her do that, he snapped, in front of everyone. I didn't stop her, I said. There's a difference. He stepped inside, uninvited, pacing the small living room. Do you have any idea what people are saying? Boards I've been asked to step down from. Invitations rescinded. I waited. You could have warned me, he continued. Handled it privately, like family. I met his eyes then. Family doesn't erase the truth to protect itself, I said calmly. It faces it. He scoffed. You've always been dramatic. No, I replied. I've been consistent. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he spoke again, quieter now. What do you want? I considered the question carefully. I want boundaries, I said. You don't speak for me, you don't define me, and you don't get to trade my life for your comfort. He stared at me, searching for leverage that no longer existed. And the house, he asked. My lawyer will be in touch, I said. You can stay, but you'll pay fair market rent. Every dollar goes into a scholarship fund for children of fallen service members. His mouth opened, closed. You'd do that to me, he whispered. I shook my head. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm doing something with what I own. He left without another word. The door closed softly behind him, the sound final but not cruel. Weeks passed. The noise died down. The headlines moved on. Ava and my brother postponed the wedding indefinitely. She and I stayed in touch, two soldiers who understood that loyalty wasn't inherited, it was earned. One evening, an email arrived from a foundation I'd quietly supported for years. Attached was a short video. A young woman appeared on the screen, standing in a dorm room, nervous but smiling. Hello, she said. My name is Sarah. My father was killed in Iraq when I was 12. I was told this message might reach the person who made my scholarship possible. I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you, I'm here. She swallowed hard. You believed in me when no one else could. The video ended. I sat there for a long time, the room quiet around me, tears running freely down my face. Not from pain. From peace. I finally understood what my service had given me, not rank, not recognition, but the ability to draw a line and stand behind it, to protect what mattered, to walk away without losing myself. They say home is where the heart is. Sometimes you have to leave home to find it. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt unseen or dismissed or forced to choose between truth and belonging, I'd like to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from. We tell these stories for those who've carried their battles quietly. If you want to keep walking this road with us, subscribe. There are more stories waiting. Stories of strength, of reckoning, and of finding your way back to yourself. Let's continue the journey together.